To follow along with the notes, you can do so on the YouVersion Bible app on your phone or tablet. Open up the app, open up events, open up North Augusta Church, and you're there. It's November. You're welcome. And in November, for the last several years, we've, for somewhat obvious reasons, chosen to focus on gratitude. The backstory of that is that several years ago, Thanksgiving was coming up, and I thought, I should put together some Thanksgiving sermons. So I started looking through, different scriptures and then finding, different stuff for illustrations, and I ran across a guy named Dr. Robert or Bob Emmons, and he teaches psychology at University of California, Berkeley. He's involved in something called positive psychology movement. And years ago, he was involved in a conference that was supposed to sort of be on the human virtues from kind of a psychological standpoint. And you were supposed to take one of those virtues and present everything, all the research and everything that had been found out about it. And because he drug his feet and called late, all the other topics have been taken, and he got gratitude. And so he started looking for the clinical research that had been done on gratitude and couldn't find any. Like there just wasn't any. There was kind of part of a study from like the 1920s, and it wasn't the point of the study. It was just kind of a side note. So he decided, okay, well, if I'm going to do this well, then I need to actually do the research. So he started doing the research. And what he found was absolutely fascinating. And this is one of those things, it was really interesting to me because my bachelor's degree is actually in psychology. And one of the things that's fascinating to me is when you find especially newer concepts in psychology that coincide with very ancient things that Scripture had been saying and that the Bible's been promoting. I think that's kind of cool. So this was one of those cases. Emmons is interesting in that he also had he grew up kind of Christian, but he had lost his faith or really wasn't practicing it very much when he started this research, and the research actually brought him back to it. So I reached out to him at the time, and we had an interaction. I've had several over the years, but I talked to him about wanting to look at his research as a church, because part of what he promotes is this idea that gratitude, when it's practiced, okay, and I need to make that distinction, because I'm not just talking about, I'm going to say something this morning and you're going to be like, oh yeah, gratitude is good, I'll remember to feel more grateful. No, you won't. It's not the way that works. The way that this stuff works is you practice. There are actual practices that cultivate gratitude in your life. And as you practice them, they have certain effects in your life. And this is one, if you've heard me talk about this before, it's one of the few times, normally when I say stuff, I'll say stuff like, here's something and you try it, and I really think you'll be surprised. Da, da, da. Here's the one that because of the research, because of the way that it's been done, because of the results of it, I say, okay, if you'll do this, I absolutely guarantee it'll improve your life. I don't say that about absolutely everything. Everybody's a little bit different. But if you'll actually practice this, the results of the research are not even, they're not even questionable. I mean, it's fascinating. So, if you want to know the kind of thing that I'm talking about, Emmons, who's written a number of books, you can pick them up anywhere, I recommend them. He says, numerous psychological, physical, and social benefits are associated with gratitude. A host of recent studies have examined its effects on health and well-being, and these clinical trials, laboratory experiments, and large-scale surveys have revealed that the practice of gratitude has dramatic, lasting, and positive results every time. Every time. Not most of the time, not it tends to trend this way. If you actually practice this, it has positive results in your life every time. What kind of results am I talking about? Well, keeping a gratitude diary or journal, if you prefer that word, for 2 weeks keeping a gratitude diary or journal for 2 weeks produced sustained reductions in perceived stress, and if you want to get specific, 28% after 2 weeks. 28% reduction in perceived stress, and depression, the 16% reduction in depression, in healthcare practitioners. So this isn't just a general sample. This is specifically healthcare practitioners, which is actually a higher stress category. Gratitude is related to 23% lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol, meaning people who practice gratitude, who actually maintain the actual practices, that when they measured their brain chemistry, the stress hormone cortisol went down by 23%. Get my numbers right. Oh, and that gratitude diary or journal that I mentioned before, if you go into what they actually did, I don't know what that conjures in your head. The thing I say every year is I've never been good at diaries or journals because I tend to lose the notebooks. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. This is just a matter of, it could be an app on your phone, but you're documenting. And what I mean by documenting is you are writing a sentence about something that you're grateful for. And we'll go into what actual gratefulness is. It's not just, yay, I like good stuff, that it actually recognizes where it comes from and that kind of thing. But it was one sentence, and it wasn't even every day. Like for the research that I talked about before and the results it had, it was one sentence 2 or 3 times a week, and it had that kind of result. It exhibits itself in unexpected ways. Dietary fat intake is reduced by as much as 25% when people keep a gratitude journal. Writing a letter of gratitude. This one's amazing. Writing a letter of gratitude reduced feelings of hopelessness in 88% of suicidal inpatients and increased levels of optimism in 94% of them. So there's your sample. People who are suicidal to the point that they have been committed, they're on some kind of hold, they're inpatient because of suicidal thoughts, that when they kept that kind of gratitude journal, their feelings of hopelessness were reduced in 88% of them, and their levels of optimism went up in 94% of them. Gratitude is related to a 10% improvement in sleep quality in patients with chronic pain. Not just everybody, patients who have chronic pain issues, ongoing, constant pain issues, debilitating pain issues, their sleep quality improved by 10%. 76% of them, by the way, already had insomnia, and also 19% lower levels of depression in people with chronic pain. Now, that's just a sample. There's actually a whole lot more of these benefits, actual physical, even health benefits, by people who practice gratitude. Now, practicing gratitude, there are a number of ways that you can do it. We have ways to give you several different things to try out. The other thing that Dr. Emmons suggests, now anytime you practice some of this, there is some good benefit, but in terms of seeing sustained, noticeable change, he says that takes practicing it for about 21 days, which makes sense with everything that we know about forming and breaking habits too. So in November, for the past several years, and I've packaged it different ways, we'll talk about it at the end, but in addition to this, we're issuing kind of a 21-day gratitude challenge for our church. And I'll give you ways to do that. It's basically, I dare you to practice gratitude and see what benefits it has in your life. If you practice gratitude and you come back to me and say, look, I did this and my life is measurably worse, I will publicly retract the statement. No, I really gave it my all, I practiced gratitude, and I feel terrible, everything is worse. If that actually happens, if you really try it and it doesn't go well, let me know, I will publicly retract it, but I think it's a pretty safe bet. Now, let's walk through some of this. I'll work some of Dr. Emmons' stuff in because, again, like I told you, I think he's discovering things that the Bible was kind of promoting all along, so they lay in together really nicely. But we're going to start with Philippians chapter 4, and we'll start in verse 4. Philippians chapter 4, we're starting in verse 4. He says to the Philippian church, "Rejoice in the Lord always." I will say it again, rejoice. "Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything." Now, as far as commands go, those are weird. Rejoice in the Lord always, and I'll say it again, rejoice. Well, sometimes it's really easy to rejoice, sometimes not so much. You've had circumstances that it's hard to rejoice in, correct? Yes, I know you have. I have. And how helpful is it for somebody to come up to you in the middle of that? You say, "Man, I'm really having a hard time. I'm struggling with all this stuff. I'm really fighting some depression, some anxiety." And somebody comes in and says, "Oh, rejoice at all times." And I'll tell you what, I'll help you out. I'll say it again, rejoice. Oh, hadn't thought of that. As a command, not that helpful. Right? I know it's the Bible. As a command, in your life, in your experience, not that helpful. Let your gentleness be evident to all, which means be so gentle even when other people make it hard that they can see it. Do not be anxious about anything, again, as a command. You're feeling a lot of anxiety. You're very worried about something, and then that helpful person also always comes by who tells you, hey, don't worry. Helpful? No. If you could not worry, you would have already done so, correct? It's not that you haven't thought of not worrying. It's that you're consumed by anxiety. Now, before you get too uncomfortable with me telling you things that look like commands in the Bible are terrible commands, I'm going to float out there that, number one, they're not meant to be disembodied commands. They're a part of a letter and sustained thought, and he's going somewhere with it. This isn't the book of Proverbs where you get like the little fortune cookie slips that are taped together. This is Paul writing a letter to the Philippian church. So he's not just lobbing out, here's some helpful tips. He's giving them something that's going to help them with this. I really think, because I actually think Paul's a good communicator, that he puts it out this way because it's striking and they're going to want to know the next thing he says, because on the face of it by itself, if he just sent them like a greeting card that had that in it, it wouldn't be that helpful. So where's he going with it? Pick up in the second part of verse 6. But in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So he said, after he says, hey, rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. Don't be anxious about anything. But in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. Now, it's that with thanksgiving that almost seems shoehorned in. Like you could remove it and the sentence would flow okay, right? But in every situation, by prayer and petition, present your request to God. That works fine, even sounds good. It's not even wrong. But I'm going to go ahead and suggest that with thanksgiving is not shoehorned in. It's not that Paul was trying to meet a word count or something. He said, I need some more words. It's the key to everything. It's the pivot point. It's what makes the whole thing work and not seem nonsensical. See, with thanksgiving, prayers and petitions is what he says. Present prayers and petitions to God in every situation. And it's one thing if you're firing off the emergency flare prayer, and I don't even have a problem with those. I've been there. Something's going on, and you just, God help me, you just throw it out there. I'm not knocking that. There's something to it. But there's There's another thing to it if you're really wrestling with something, if you have things that are presenting you with anxiety, that are making it hard to rejoice in every situation, that are making it hard to let your gentleness be seen by all, because gentleness is not what you want to show them at the moment. That when you go to God in prayer to present those requests and petitions, that the context of the prayer is thanksgiving. If when there's a need, if you're struggling with something, if when the world isn't making sense, you go to God. If you don't know the way forward and you don't know the answer, and you go to God, and the way that you set it up is you start to thank God for the good that's in your life, for the good that's come before, for the good that's happening even now, even in the midst of it. If you develop eyes to see, eyes to look for it, you're thanking God, and that's real communication that's going on. But as you're doing that, you're also reminding yourself of the living and active God who has been there, who has shown up. And presenting sort of, I promise you this isn't in the notes, but it's where my brain went, so you get it. There's a scene in the movie Talladega Nights. This is not an official endorsement of the movie Talladega Nights, but there's a scene in the movie Talladega Nights where Will Ferrell, who is written to be funny but dumb, he's had this accident and he's trying to get back into racing. It's a racing movie. And so he gets back in the car and he's driving around ridiculously slow. He's acting like everything's flying by, and everybody's looking at him. He's just crawling because he's still so scared. And then there's a point where something goes wrong with the car, and he starts running around, and he thinks that he's on fire, and he's not. He's just remembering the old accident. And he starts yelling out, "Help me, God, help me, Jesus, help me, Oprah, help me, Tom Cruise's God, help me," because he's just firing off emergency prayers to whoever because he's scared. Okay? It's one thing to when you run into something and you're scared, you're anxious, and you're just firing it off, even if you're just sending it to the one address. And that lands a certain way. It feels a certain way. You're reaching out because you think there might be help, sure. But it's a different engagement altogether when you've gone through thanking God for the things that have come before, for the ways that he's come through before, for the things that even now in the middle of this darkness are still there as points of light, are still there as goodness. Let me tell you something. If you don't intentionally look for them, you'll start to miss them. They won't be what processes, especially if you start to focus on the darkness. You won't see. Some of you heard me mention this before, but John Gottman, who's the sort of best living researcher of sort of marriage relationships that's alive right now, one of the things that he said, I saw an interview with him one time, and they asked him, what's one thing that you could tell people that would improve their marriages immediately? And he said, well, if you just give me one thing, I'll tell you this. He said that when we look at the people who are successful at marriage, who are like the masters of it, and you look at the people who are kind of the disasters of marriage that just don't do it well at all, the thing that stands out the most about the people who really do it well is that they are constantly on the lookout for things that their partner is getting right. That they're looking constantly for the good that's there, for the good that they do. Not that there isn't bad, not that they're ignoring the bad. But what they're on the lookout for is what they can be grateful for about their spouse, about the things that they do well, about the things that they can be thankful for. And he said, what's fascinating is that when you have somebody who is not doing that, who is not on the lookout for what's going well. Matter of fact, if you get somebody who's in sort of a critical frame of mind where they're looking for the things that are going to go wrong because they expect this spouse to do things so wrong, that not only does that make you interpret things sometimes in a way where you see bad that isn't there, but you literally miss 50% of the good things that happen that a third party would notice. They don't even register for you. But people who cultivate this grateful way of looking at their spouse, this grateful way of looking for the things that they're getting right, things to be thankful for, they catch those things. It's not that they don't catch the negative things, it's that they have the negative things in a different context. They process them differently. And so Gottman says this grateful way of looking at your relationship, at your spouse, is actually a more accurate way of perceiving the world. Because the critical eye misses half of the good that's there. Now, I believe that can be expanded beyond just marriage relationships. I think that's true of how we perceive the world. That if you are going into the world and you're expecting that all blessings are gifts from the Father of heavenly lights who does not change like shifting shadows, that your expectation is that God is blessing, that good things in your life, we're just going to assume they came from God. And so you live with an expectation that blessings are taking place, that there are good things to see and find. What you look for, you will find. And if you don't, or if you get in sort of a critical frame of mind where you're looking just constantly for everything that's wrong, you'll miss half of it. It's there, you're just not registering it. In his book, The Little Book of Gratitude, which I highly recommend, Dr. Emmons says, our language reflects our thoughts, and our thoughts partially create our reality. Grateful people freely use words such as gifts, giver, blessings, blessed, fortune, fortunate, and abundance. Less grateful people are preoccupied with burdens, curses, deprivations, and complaints. The language of gratitude draws our attention to the positive contributions that others have made in our lives. It's possible to shift self-defeating talk to an internal dialogue cloaked in thankfulness. Grateful people are masters at turning their minds to the ways in which they're supported and sustained. Once you start to notice kindness, more good actually begins to come your way. What are you developing? What are you cultivating eyes to see in the world? I think we think in our cynicism we're being more wise. I think we think in our cynicism where we're just expecting things to go wrong to start with so that we won't be disappointed. We think we're being wise. We're actually blinding ourselves. We're actually creating a distorted way of seeing the world. And this isn't lesson today, by the way. It's one that's quite easy to manipulate by other people. Other people can manipulate that really, really easily for their own ends. Pick up in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or heard or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Now notice the connection in both this passage and the one we read before it between thankfulness or gratitude and peace, or having the peace of God. And it's interesting because it doesn't say, here's how you train yourself to have peace. It's the peace of God will be with you. And the peace of God will be with you. As if it's something that's given to you. You're not the active party in that sentence. You are cultivating gratitude. You are shaping the way that you see and perceive the world. You are connecting with God in this way where you're saying, I recognize that you've been there. I recognize that you did this and this and this. And even though this situation seemed hopeless, so did those. Dr. Emmons says, across the board, the grateful mind reaps a massive advantage. As we have seen, the results of rigorously conducted studies have given us a glimpse of what life can look like when a person is gripped by gratitude. However, to experience the sustainable benefits of practicing gratitude, we must become habitually aware of gratitude-inspiring events and circumstances, then declare and share these with others. So it's not just a matter of being more aware of it, although that is part of it. It's a matter of actually if you want to actually become more aware of it, if you actually want it to have an effect in your life, it's not a matter of just passively noticing things. And that's why they talk about diaries and journals. That's why he talks about declaring and sharing, not just because that rhymes and sounds good in a book, but because there's something to it. It's one thing if something happens and you go, that was neat. It's another thing if you actually document it in some way. And let me be clear. According to the research, it doesn't appear to matter if you ever go back and read that again. It doesn't appear to matter if you ever go back, and let's say that you are just not good with writing things down and keeping things up, so you have a little voice memo thing on your phone, and every once in a while you take it out and you document, you just say into the microphone, here's the good thing that happened, here's the good thing that I'm thankful for, I'm grateful to this person for this. Apparently, the act of putting words to it embeds it deeper in your mind and in your heart. If you want to remember it, you stop and you document it somewhere. And you know this is true. You know the people who are super good at remembering people's names, and you watch them and they meet somebody and they say the person's name again immediately? That's not just an annoying habit. There's a methodology to that. It's about making the thing stick. It could be as simple as, here's this great thing that happened. I got to remember to tell my wife when I get home. I got to remember to tell my kid this. I got to remember to tell other people about this. You made the point of putting it to words, putting it to language, and that embeds it. And the more that you do these things, the more that you tangibly practice gratitude, the more that it becomes integrated into the way that you think, into the way that you feel, into the way that you perceive and interpret the world around you, in the way that you interact with other people. Grateful people are more kind, period. It's demonstrable. It's measurable. Grateful people are more hopeful, because of course they are. Grateful people, I'll get louder for emphasis, grateful people have better relationships, because of course they do. And look, I'm as convinced about this stuff as I can possibly be. I'm also a human being. You're familiar with human beings. Even stuff that we really know and we believe, it's easy for us to not forget exactly, but to fall out of practice. You know, stuff gets busy. And so even the good stuff that you think is really important can fall by the wayside because just until this stuff dies down. And here's the thing that I know. When I'm regularly practicing gratitude, I'm a better person. When I'm regularly practicing gratitude, I'm better to the people in my life. Matter of fact, I'd go so far, I didn't ask them, but I would bet good money on it. When I'm not practicing gratitude regularly, I bet you my family can tell you. Not because they see me doing the thing, but because it affects who I am and how I interact with people. I'd love to say that I just get it all the time and I'm doing it, but I don't. And one of the things that I like about, I've really come to like, about there being sort of repeated holidays in different years and what they focus on, is that I think we need reminders. Because we forget or sometimes we just slide. Because it turns out that when all that activity that makes us have to put things on hold, feel like we have to put things on hold until this dies down, it seems like when that dies down, something else kicks up. And this kind of thing is supposed to be about the way that you live your life anyway, the way that you're navigating, the way that you're making it through those things, because life is life. Stuff happens. This is who you're supposed to be in the midst of it. This shapes you in the midst of it to be the best version of yourself in the midst of it. I'm going to give you, and we've done this several different ways over the years. Some years I give you a packet that has an activity for every day, and it's basically a week's worth of activities, and then we roll through it 3 times. And the idea is that you try all these things out, and some of them are going to resonate with you better than others, and they're not going to be the same thing for each of you. And the only way that you know that is if you try them. There is no version where you just become grateful without going through practices, by the way. Now, I'm just going to willpower my way to being more grateful. Good luck with that. But if you really want to do it, you're going to have to do things that aren't ordinary or natural for you, and you're going to do them enough that they become ordinary or natural for you, and they're going to shape you as you do them. This year I didn't want to do here's something for every day. I wanted to give you some freedom to kind of move around with it and choose it. So a couple of years ago I came up with a different version of it, a different activity that we're calling Gratitude Bingo. They were sent out with a bulletin. There's some in the back. Also, you can pull it off of the Bible app. There's a link out to it. It looks like this or on the screen. I don't know why I'm showing you this because it's up there. But here's the way that this will work. Listed on it are various gratitude practices. Some of them are repeated. You've played. How many people are at least familiar with the game of bingo? All right, that's what I thought. If not, I'm not sure how much I can help you anyway. Now, the deal is that ideally, for the next 21 days, you would find an activity and you would do an activity every day, ideally. But what I want you to do is to at least try to get some form of bingo every week. You get them in a row, that's bingo, okay? If you get a bunch of them in and they don't make a line, then maybe that's not great planning, but still good for you. Okay? I'll take it. But if you want to add an extra degree of difficulty, go for the straight line. It could be diagonal even, and that's bingo. I even threw in a free space in the middle because I played bingo before, and that gives you one more thing to be grateful for. So the idea is that you look and through the week, and the best way to do it, I'm not saying you wouldn't get any benefits if you just tried to get all 6 of them in one day, but it'd be better if you kind of spread it out. And so one a day, you would try to get one of these a day until you got bingo, and then you say you got bingo, and then people in church know what you're talking about. But you find the ones that you think connect with you. You find the ones that sound interesting that you want to try. And then next week you'll do it again, and the next week you'll do it again. And then you've gone through some form of practicing gratitude for 21 days, and that's where it really is supposed to start kicking in, and it ends on the week of Thanksgiving. So, here's an example. Let's see what I got for you. Sometimes it's as simple as write down 3 things that happened to you for which you are not responsible. 3 good things that happened to you that you're not responsible for making them happen. You understand what I mean? It could be a blessing from God. It could be somebody else just decided to do something good in your life. You didn't make it happen. Somebody else did good for you. This one is simple. Most of you do this at Thanksgiving anyway. It works on other days. Have each member, I call it the grateful table, have each member of the family share at least one thing they're grateful for at dinner time. My family's done this one for years. The fascinating thing is when you establish this as a practice, you establish this as sort of a tradition in your family, one thing that happens to you is since you know you're going to sit down and share something to be grateful for with your family that night, you're on the lookout all day. You have this ritual, and so it creates kind of this expectation that there's going to be something and I'm going to have something to share, so my eyes are open to find it. There's another one called Never Imagine. Think of an aspect of your life for which you feel grateful, and then write a paragraph about how life would be different without it. So think about something in your life that you're grateful for, and then try to imagine your life without it. And write a paragraph of what that would be like. Could be a person, could be a situation you're in. There's one called Thank You for Your Service. Make a point to thank a service worker like a cashier or a waitress, the one that people ignore more and more. And I found that since we've been in quarantine and people are losing more social skills, the number of people I see staying on their phone while they check out and treating the cashier like they're not a person has gone way up. I could take a minute to remind you, I will take a minute to remind you, that if you survey waiters and waitresses in the country, it's the most predictable response ever, their least favorite day to work ever is Sunday. Because, man, they'll tell you. I've done this at big conferences and stuff and then ask, are there any waiters and waitresses in the crowd, without giving them information. Take whatever random person raises their hand, I ask them the question, they answer the same every single time. There's not been an exception. Ever. And then I say, why? And every time they say, most demanding customers, lowest tips. It's kind of a black eye on the church, folks. The people who are supposed to be living gratefully are supposed to be able to recognize, especially those in low position, and not show favoritism and treat them with grace and love and respect. That's not grateful living. So I'm saying make a point to actually engage and thank those people as if they're people, because they are. Gratitude letter. Write a letter of thanksgiving to someone who has been a blessing to you. Be specific about how they've blessed you and send the letter. Or maybe call them up and say, hey, can I take you to lunch? And you take them to lunch and you read the letter to them out loud. However you want to do it. The fascinating thing about the gratitude letter is it's one of the most dramatic effects. Like it has such a positive effect that some people say it's as effective as some antidepressants. I mean, those are clinical people saying that, not just some random guy who thinks that would be cool if it were true. That's what the studies actually say. And that writing one gratitude letter, has the same effects as certain antidepressants for as long as 3 months. I'm going to tell you, I've done this several times now, and it is a fascinating exercise to go through. It's a worthwhile exercise to go through. You'll be surprised at what it does to you. I got another one called Gotcha Gratitude. That's catch one member of your family doing 3 good things right today. Write them down and or thank that person personally. And here's the deal. I don't even envision that as you saying, okay, I'm going to go through the day. Oh, look at that. They did 3 good things. I'm saying you wake up that morning and decide, I'm looking for them. I'm going to find 3 good things that they do today. Watch how differently your day goes. Watch how differently your interactions with that person go. To whom for what is another activity. It's write down up to 5 things that you're grateful for and whom you're grateful, and to whom you're grateful for each of them. The way gratitude works isn't just, yay, good things are cool and good things happen to me. It's recognizing that there's always in some form a giver, even if that giver is God, who's the giver of all good gifts. It's not enough to just say, somebody fixes you a meal. It's not enough to just say, yay, good food is good. It's to recognize that somebody did that. Somebody gave that to you. Somebody put effort into it. Somebody wanted you to have it. There's always a giver. And to make it gratitude, it recognizes that it's not just, yay, good things happen to me. It's that there are givers, that there is benefit that comes that is not earned or deserved. Gratitude exists inside of grace. Little things. It's easy to take the tiny, ordinary things others do for us for granted. For one day, try and notice and say thank you for even the littlest things that people do for you. And be specific. So that's the deal, and it's completely up to you. You print it out. I've given it to you all kinds of ways. It's kind of a game. It can be fun to look for opportunities to do so. And if you do these things, I guarantee they'll have a positive benefit in your life. This is part of what it means to be a faithful follower of God in this world. We are cultivating a way of seeing the world, a way of being in the world. People of faith should be grateful people because of the story we find ourselves in, because of the God that we have, who's most clearly seen in Jesus, who's living and active in this world. We should be the people who are going through the world. Not that we never experience suffering, but we have a different way of going through it because of what we've cultivated in our life, because of the relationship with God that we've cultivated in our life, because of the way that we see and interpret the world as faithful people who believe that God is living and active, present, and doing good. So as we lead into the season where you get to have an enormous meal, and take a big nap afterwards, maybe with football, maybe not. It depends on how it goes at your house. Let's be intentional about it. Not the football, do what you want. But let's be intentional about the gratitude. As we leave into where we're going to have like this feast, where we as a nation, whether you go to church or not, have this idea that you're supposed to pause and be grateful. As the people who think that we know the address of who we're supposed to send thank you to, let's go ahead and prepare. As we lead into it, start cultivating gratitude in your life and watch what happens. Watch how the same world begins to look different to you. Watch how your interactions with other people change. And by the time you get to Thanksgiving, where we're celebrating, watch how you're able to approach that differently. But it starts now. It starts today. And it's not something that's going to happen passively. It's something that you're going to have to decide to do. And nobody can make you. So choose. Choose to be intentionally grateful or not. But not choosing is choosing not. It's just a lazy way of doing it. Cultivate gratitude, and I guarantee you'll be glad that you did. I guarantee the people around you will be glad that you did. So may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. The church said together.